You're about to see a story that will shock you, make your heart race, and keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. Imagine a billionaire, one of the richest men in Chicago, discovering something unusual happening with his beloved autistic daughter. Something that looks completely wrong, but what he does next will backfire in ways he never expected. Before we dive in, I want you to stay with me until the end, because this story is full of twists, suspense, and emotions you won't see coming. Trust me, every second matters, and you won't believe what unfolds when love, fear, and misjudgment collide in a single moment. Jonathan Harper, a self-made billionaire, has always prided himself on control. Control over his empire, his life, and above all, the safety of his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. He believes he knows everything. But tonight, something happens that will challenge everything he thinks he knows about trust, care, and judgment. And there's a twist. The person he thinks is inexperienced and incapable, the one he assumes couldn't possibly know what she's doing, might actually be the key to keeping his daughter safe. But how does he realize it? How does a single action spiral into a near emergency? This story isn't just about fear. It's about love, mistakes, and the shocking consequences of acting too fast without understanding the full picture. So make sure you watch every single second, because what Jonathan does next will leave you speechless. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this, because trust me, this one is unforgettable. Jonathan Harper's chest tightened as he stood outside Emily's nursery door, his eyes fixed on the scene inside. Karen, the maid he had quietly underestimated for years, knelt beside his daughter with a strange intensity. To him, she looked clumsy, uneducated, someone who couldn't possibly know the right way to care for Emily. But she moved with focus, whispering instructions and adjusting items on the floor. Jonathan's mind raced. He knew Emily's routines better than anyone, or so he thought. Any deviation could be dangerous, he told himself. And yet, something about Karen tonight didn't make sense. Her hands moved quickly but deliberately. Every time he tried to interpret her actions, his fear twisted them into something threatening. Was she giving the wrong dosage of medicine? Was she performing a therapy incorrectly? The thought that his own daughter could be at risk made his heart pound, sweat form on his brow, and his fingers tremble. Emily looked up at Karen and smiled, oblivious to the tension growing in the room. But Jonathan saw chaos. He could not let his mind rest. Years of wealth, experience, and control had taught him one thing. Mistakes could be deadly. And right now, he believed he had only seconds to prevent disaster. Without thinking, Jonathan pushed the nursery door open. Karen turned, startled, her hands frozen mid-action. Emily squealed in surprise. A small bottle tipped, its contents spilling across the floor. Jonathan's heart sank instantly. This was not how it was supposed to happen. In his mind, he had acted to protect Emily, but the very act of rushing in, interfering, had begun a chain of events he could not yet see, a mistake that would escalate far beyond anything he had imagined. Jonathan's pulse raced as he lunged forward to grab the bottle from Karen's hands, convinced he was preventing disaster. In a split second, his grip knocked the bottle to the floor, spilling its contents across the plush nursery carpet. Emily shrieked in surprise, scrambling back on her small chair, her tiny body trembling. Jonathan froze, realizing too late that his protective action had triggered exactly what he feared most, a near emergency. Karen's eyes widened, her voice sharp but controlled. "Sir, wait." She started, but Jonathan, blinded by fear, barely registered her words. He had assumed that someone like her, illiterate, quiet, inexperienced, couldn't possibly handle a child like Emily. Now, he saw that his assumptions were not only wrong, they were dangerous. Emily's breathing quickened, her hands clinging to the edge of the chair, and Jonathan's stomach sank. His daughter, the one person he had sworn to keep safe, was reacting as if she were in real danger, and it was his fault. Every second that passed made the room feel smaller, tighter, and more suffocating. Panic clawed at him, every rational thought slipping away as he tried to fix the situation with more haste, more urgency, and more mistakes. Karen moved quickly to calm Emily, but Jonathan's interference had already caused confusion. Her hands moved with precision, trying to stabilize Emily, but Jonathan's frantic energy threw off the delicate balance she had been maintaining. He realized in a sickening instant that his instincts to save Emily had backfired, and badly. The room was a storm of fear, confusion, and unintended chaos. Jonathan Harper, the man who had always believed he could control everything in his life, now faced the horrifying truth. In trying to protect the one person he loved above all, he had nearly made things irreparably worse. The room was thick with tension. Emily's little body trembled, and Jonathan's heart pounded so hard he could barely think. He had acted out of love, but now the panic in Emily's eyes reflected back at him, and guilt clawed through every fiber of his being. Karen, however, moved with a quiet precision that made Jonathan stop mid-step. "Jonathan, step back," she said firmly, her voice calm, yet commanding. Her hands reached out to Emily, guiding her carefully and speaking softly, each word measured. Jonathan wanted to argue, to explain why he had intervened, but he couldn't. The panic had already escalated, and now he had to trust her, whether he liked it or not. Karen had grown up in a small town, had no formal education, and couldn't read or write, but she knew Emily's routines, her triggers, and her needs better than anyone in this building. She gently removed the spilled bottle, using a clean cloth to stabilize the environment, all while keeping Emily's attention on her. Her eyes were focused, unflinching, unwavering. Jonathan watched, frozen, as the woman he had underestimated orchestrated what looked like a delicate life-saving procedure. His mind swirled. How could someone he had dismissed as uneducated be handling this with such expertise? Every assumption he had made about her intelligence and ability now seemed absurd. Emily began to calm under Karen's care, her breaths slowing as she looked up at her trusted caregiver. Jonathan swallowed hard, the weight of realization pressing down on him. His protective action had not only caused chaos, it had almost jeopardized the very safety he was trying to ensure. And at that moment, the truth hit him. Karen had known exactly what to do all along. He had acted too fast, misjudged her, and his next move would backfire even more catastrophically. Jonathan's chest heaved as he watched Karen gently guide Emily back to her chair. Every instinct screamed at him that he needed to do something, anything to save his daughter. He stepped closer, his expensive shoes echoing on the hardwood, and reached toward Emily, thinking he could fix the chaos he had caused. But as soon as he moved, Emily flinched, letting out a small, frightened cry. The bottle spilled slightly again, and a few of her toys toppled over. Karen's hands flew to steady her, but Jonathan's interference made it impossible. In a terrifying instant, Emily's breathing became rapid and uneven. She clutched at her chest, and Jonathan froze, realizing the gravity of the situation. Panic surged. He had acted to protect her, but his impulsive move had triggered the near disaster he had feared. Every billionaire lesson in control, every emergency drill, every decision-making instinct seemed useless now. His daughter, the one person he had vowed to keep safe, was suddenly at the center of an escalating crisis, and it was all because he had acted without understanding. Karen, despite being illiterate and often underestimated, moved with uncanny precision. She guided Emily carefully, whispering soft reassurances, adjusting her posture, stabilizing the small bottle, and cleaning up the spill, all while keeping her attention focused. Jonathan stood frozen, overwhelmed by guilt and shock, slowly realizing that his fear and assumptions had nearly endangered the very child he loved. For the first time, Jonathan understood a painful truth. In his rush to protect Emily, he had created a situation far more dangerous than anything he had imagined. The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken panic, and the audience is left wondering. Would Emily recover from this near-tragic moment, and could Jonathan ever undo the consequences of his blunder? The nursery fell silent, except for Emily's small, uneven breaths. Jonathan stood frozen, staring at his daughter and the maid he had so badly misjudged. His heart was still pounding, his palms slick with sweat, as the weight of what had just happened pressed down on him. He had acted out of love, but in his panic, he had almost caused a disaster. Karen, calm but sharp, finally looked up at Jonathan. Her eyes held no anger, only a quiet firmness. "Sir," she said gently, "I know you were trying to help, but Emily needed me to finish what I started. That's how she stays safe." Jonathan's throat tightened. He had always thought that someone like Karen, illiterate, quiet, seemingly simple, could never handle a child like Emily. Yet, her movements, her understanding of the routines, and her ability to calm Emily now revealed the truth. She had been prepared for this moment all along. Her intelligence, her experience, and her intuition had kept Emily from real harm. He swallowed hard, guilt and awe swirling together. The spilled bottle, the toppled toys, the panic he had caused, it all made sense now. The very person he had doubted had been trying to save his daughter, and his impulsive interference had turned a routine into a near emergency. Jonathan stepped back slowly, watching Karen stabilize Emily completely. He realized that his assumptions, his pride, and his fear had blinded him. For years, he had thought control meant knowing everything, but tonight had taught him something far more important. Understanding, patience, and trust mattered more than any instinct or wealth. As Emily slowly relaxed in Karen's arms, Jonathan made a silent vow. Never again would he underestimate her, and never again would he let fear dictate his actions. But one question lingered in the room, unspoken. Would he be able to regain Emily's trust after putting her in danger, even accidentally? Jonathan's hands trembled as he approached Emily, who was now slowly settling back into Karen's care. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. How could he have acted so impulsively? How could he have misjudged someone he had entrusted with the safety of the one person he loved most? Guilt gnawed at him with relentless intensity. "Emily, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. She looked up at him with wide, cautious eyes. Even though she was calm now, the memory of the earlier chaos lingered in her tiny gestures. Jonathan realized that his actions had not only endangered her, they had shaken her sense of security, the one thing he had always promised to protect. Karen stepped back slightly, giving Emily space, but her eyes never left Jonathan. Her quiet, intelligent gaze conveyed a mixture of understanding and unspoken warning. He had made a mistake, but there was still a chance to make things right, if he acted wisely. Determined to regain control, without further panic, Jonathan took a deep breath and carefully followed Karen's guidance. Every movement was measured, every word deliberate. He had to rebuild trust, not just with Emily, but with the woman whose skills he had underestimated for so long. Yet even as he tried to steady the situation, a new tension emerged. Emily flinched slightly at a sudden sound outside the nursery, and Jonathan's heart jumped. He realized that even a moment of distraction, a second of doubt, could reignite the fear and chaos. The stakes were higher than ever. One wrong move could undo everything Karen had worked so meticulously to restore. Jonathan now understood that saving his daughter was not about acting first. It was about observing, listening, and trusting. But the question remained, could he truly regain control, or would his next move once again backfire in ways he couldn't yet imagine? Jonathan's hands were still shaky as he watched Karen carefully straighten the nursery, her movements calm, precise, and deliberate. Every little adjustment she made, arranging Emily's toys, checking the bottle, guiding Emily's posture, revealed something Jonathan had never realized. This wasn't random action. This was strategy. This was knowledge. This was care. He felt a wave of shock mixed with awe. Karen, the woman he had assumed incapable, illiterate, and inexperienced, had been acting with a clarity and intelligence he had never given her credit for. All the subtle steps she took, the whispered instructions, even the timing of each action, it had been designed to protect Emily, not harm her. Jonathan sank into the chair, guilt pressing down like never before. He had acted out of fear, rushing in without understanding, assuming the worst. His assumptions had nearly caused the disaster he had feared. And the worst part? He had underestimated someone whose insight and dedication had almost single-handedly prevented it. Emily, now calm in Karen's arms, looked at Jonathan with an expression of trust that he had almost broken. His chest ached with the realization that his impulsive action had put her at risk. And yet, Karen had saved the day quietly, without complaint, without recognition. A quiet voice broke through his thoughts. "Jonathan," Karen said gently, "Emily is safe because I knew what she needed. But your love is strong. Yes, but your fear almost made things worse. Sometimes watching and understanding is better than acting first." Jonathan nodded slowly, swallowing his pride and shame. He finally understood the truth. Control isn't about rushing in or assuming you know best. True protection comes from trust, patience, and respect for the people who actually know how to help. And in that moment, he realized that Karen had not just saved Emily. She had taught him a lesson he would never forget. The nursery was calm now, bathed in soft golden light from the city skyline. Jonathan knelt beside Emily, his hands trembling as he reached out. I'm so sorry, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She looked at him cautiously, her small fingers brushing against his. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, she leaned into him, a quiet trust returning in her eyes. Karen watched quietly, standing to the side, her posture composed, but her expression unreadable. Jonathan turned to her, his chest heavy with gratitude and shame. "Karen, I misjudged you. I was wrong to think you didn't know what you were doing. You saved her, and I nearly ruined everything." Karen nodded calmly. "Jonathan, you acted out of love. That's understandable. But protecting someone isn't about rushing in. It's about knowing what they need and having patience. Emily needed me to finish what I started. Your actions almost made it worse, but thankfully, we fixed it in time." Jonathan exhaled, the weight lifting slightly, though guilt lingered. He realized this was more than a lesson in trust. It was a lesson in humility. His wealth, power, and control meant nothing compared to understanding, patience, and the insight of someone who truly knew Emily. Emily, now calmer, reached for Karen and then back to her father. Jonathan smiled through tears, realizing that he had been given a second chance. He had almost lost sight of what mattered most, but thanks to Karen's skill, composure, and care, the worst had been avoided. "Thank you," Jonathan said quietly, looking at Karen and then at Emily. "I promise, I'll never underestimate you again." Karen smiled faintly, and Emily giggled softly, a tiny sound that made Jonathan's heart swell. In that moment, the billionaire learned that the greatest lessons aren't taught in boardrooms or spreadsheets. They're taught in moments of vulnerability, trust, and love. The city skyline glittered beyond the nursery window, but inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Jonathan Harper sat quietly, Emily nestled in his arms, while Karen stood nearby, watching with a calm, almost knowing gaze. The events of the evening weighed heavily on him, each heartbeat a reminder of how close he had come to a disaster of his own making. Jonathan looked down at Emily, her small hand wrapped around his finger. "I almost made the biggest mistake of my life," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I acted out of fear, not understanding, and it nearly cost you everything." Emily blinked up at him, her trust returning slowly, as if forgiving him in silence. Karen approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Jonathan," she said softly, "the truth is love alone isn't always enough. Knowing, patience, and trust, those are what protect the ones we care about most. Tonight proved that." He nodded, a lump in his throat, finally seeing the world differently. The maid he had dismissed, underestimated, and feared was the one who had saved his daughter, not him. Every assumption, every doubt he had held about her intelligence and capability now felt foolish. And yet, he couldn't help but feel immense gratitude. Jonathan pulled Emily close, and Karen smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting pride and relief. In that quiet moment, He understood that control was an illusion. Protection required trust, humility, and the courage to recognize the expertise of others. As the camera would fade on this scene, viewers are left with a lasting message. Sometimes the ones we underestimate are the true heroes, and acting without understanding can backfire in ways we never expect. Jonathan's journey was complete. He had almost caused tragedy, learned the hardest lesson of his life, and discovered the quiet heroism of someone he had overlooked.